The Monkey's Paw, W. W. Jacobs. Outside, the night was cold and wet, but in the small living room the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were playing chess. The old man, who was a reckless player, often put his king into such unnecessary danger that even his white-haired wife, knitting peacefully by the fire, commented on it. "Listen to that wind," said Mr. White. Having seen a fatal mistake after it was too late, he tried to keep his son from noticing it. "I'm listening," said the son, studying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." "I doubt that it'll come tonight," said his father with his hand poised over the board. "Check, mate," replied the son. "Mother, look, he's gone red again." "That's the worst thing about living this far out of town," exclaimed Mr. White, with a sudden unexpected bad temper. "Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. The pathway is a bog, and the road's a river. I don't know what people are talking about. I suppose because only 2 houses on the road have anyone in them, they think it doesn't matter." "Never mind, dear," said his wife soothingly. "Perhaps you'll win the next one." Mr. White looked up sharply, just in time to catch an amused glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard. "There he is," said Herbert White, as the gate banged loudly and heavy footsteps came toward the door. The old man rose quickly to meet the visitor. As he opened the door, he was heard sympathizing about the weather with the new arrival. He re-entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man with a red face and beady eyes. Mr. White introduced the visitor. "Sergeant Major Morris," he said. The sergeant major shook hands. Taking the seat he was offered by the fire, he watched happily while his host got out whiskey and glasses and put a small copper kettle on the fire. At the third glass of whiskey, his eyes got brighter and he began to talk. The little family listened with eager interest to the visitor from foreign lands. He told them about strange scenes and daring deeds, of wars and disasters and strange peoples. 21 years of it," said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. "When he went away, he was a skinny boy in the warehouse. Now look at him." "You don't look like it's done him any harm," said Mrs. White politely. "I'd like to go to India myself," said the old man. "Just to look round a bit, you know." "Better where you are," said the sergeant major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing softly, shook it again. "I should like to see those old temples and holy men and jugglers," said the old man. "What was that you started telling me the other day about the monkey's paw or something, Morris?" "Nothing," said the soldier hastily. "Anyway, nothing worth hearing." "Monkey's paw?" said Mrs. White curiously. "Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps," said the sergeant major offhandedly. His 3 listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips and then set it down again. His host filled it for him. "To look at," said the sergeant major, fumbling his pocket. "It's just an ordinary little paw, dried like a mummy's." He took something out of his pocket and offered it. Mrs. White drew back, making a face, but her son took it and examined it curiously. "And what is there special about it?" asked Mr. White as he took it from his son. After he looked at it, he placed it upon the table. "It had a spell put on it by an old priest," said the sergeant major. "A very holy man. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it would be sorry they had. He put a spell on it so that 3 different men could each have 3 different wishes from it." His manner was so impressive that his listeners realized their laughter seemed out of place. "Well, why don't you have 3 wishes, sir?" said Herbert White lightly. The soldier regarded him in the way that middle-aged people often look at foolish youths. "I have," he said quietly, and his red face grew pale. "And did you really have the 3 wishes granted?" asked Mrs. White. "I did," said the sergeant major, and his glass tapped against his strong teeth. "And has anybody else wished?" inquired the old lady. "The first man had his 3 wishes, yes," was the reply. "I don't know what the first 2 were, but the 3rd was for death. That's how I got the paw." His tones were so serious that a hush fell upon the group. "If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now, Morris," said the old man at last. "What do you keep it for?" The soldier shook his head. "It's silly, I suppose," he said slowly. "I did have some idea of selling it, but I don't think I will. It has caused enough trouble already. Besides, people won't buy. They think it's a fairy tale, some of them, and those who do think anything of it want to try it first and pay me afterward." "If you could have another 3 wishes," said the old man, looking at him hard, "would you have them?" "I don't know," said the other. "I don't know." He took the paw and, dangling it between his front finger and thumb, suddenly threw it upon the fire. White, with a slight cry, bent down and snatched it off. "Better let it burn," said the soldier solemnly. "If you don't want it, Morris," said the old man, "give it to me." "I won't," said his friend stubbornly. "I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Throw it on the fire again, like a sensible man." The other shook his head and examined his new possession closely. "How do you do it?" he inquired. "Hold it up in your right hand and wish aloud," said the sergeant major. "But I warn you against it." "Sounds like the Arabian Nights," said Mrs. White as she rose and began to set the supper. "Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me?" Her husband drew the paw from his pocket, and all 3 burst into laughter. The sergeant major, with a look of alarm on his face, caught him by the arm. "If you must wish," he said gruffly, "wish for something sensible."